Good afternoon, everyone. I'm advised that we're ready to start this meeting, technically anyway. I'm Karen Hiller, and I'm the City Councilwoman for District 1, and am here as chair of the City Council's Public Health and Safety Committee. It is Monday, November 16th at 3 p.m. We are at the Law Enforcement Center. We have one other committee member who is online with us virtually, and then, whoop, got both of them. All right. So if the other two committee members would introduce.
Sylvia Ortiz, Council District 3.
Neil Dobler, District 7.
Thank you so much. We have kind of a dual agenda today. First item we'll do is to approve minutes from, this says September 14th, but actually October 19th. And then I'm hoping that we can pretty much keep to the first hour on our broadband issues so that we can spend a good chunk of the second hour on our property maintenance code issues. So in simple terms, that's how hopefully we can structure the meeting. Without any further ado, I would entertain a motion to move to approve the minutes from October 19th.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the October 19th minutes. Any corrections, additions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Neil just have to wave then if you're not gonna say aye. All right. Post same sign, a motion carries. Let's move right on into internet reliability for Topeka residents. We did a lot of exploring of what was happening with not only school kids, but also seniors, job seekers, school kids who have more than one home of record, as well as perhaps are doing their homework or other schoolwork from places other than either of those homes, so that we could, and we wanted to explore a little further what actually, both get caught up and explore a little further what's actually happening. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you announce everybody that's online with us, please, so we know who's online?
Sure. If people want to go around, let me see. I'm going to start at the top and call your name. If you would just respond and say who you are and with. Starting at the top, Reva Waiwatis.
I'm Reva Waiwatis. I'm the Executive Director at Child Care Aware of Eastern Kansas here in Topeka. And I was asked to join the conversation because to bring hopefully a perspective and some information about child care facilities and how the internet access is impacting them.
Thank you. I think that's Mike Siebert.
That is me. I'm with DCF. I'm a Regional Resource Coordinator in the work program.
Thank you. Mr. Grays. We're not hearing you, Lazone.
Lazone Grace with IBSA here in Topeka.
Okay, and he'll be back as a resource for our broadband networking. Don McWilliams.
Good afternoon, Don McWilliams with the Boys and Girls Clubs in Topeka.
Thank you. Scott?
Scott C. Gowan, Chief Information Officer, Topeka Public Schools.
Megan?
Megan Battenberg, Cox Communications.
Thank you. Mike? You're muted, Mike. There.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are.
Oh, Mike Houck, the City of Topeka Property Maintenance.
Awesome, thank you. And thanks for your patience with the agenda. And Mark Price?
Mark Price, I'm a management analyst under the Public Works Department under Dan Hanover.
Okay. Taylor, do we have anybody else on? That's everybody I can see.
That's everybody.
All right, thank you. Thanks for asking, Councilwoman. I thought you could see people. Moving on then, The first item we had on the agenda was to get an update from USD 501 regarding the families in the Connect to Compete, what's happening with T-Mobile. Particularly, I'm aware that there had been a pretty big number that you had of people that you had contacted, and of those, a decent sized number that weren't yet connected. So people are curious about that, as well as what you've learned about the non-primary home connections or issues with the at-home connections.
Okay, so there's a couple interesting things to point out. First, when we last met, we had a relatively large group, but it wasn't quite as large as it is now, of eligible families. And so I believe the statistics we had at the time were roughly 64% of those families were able to be connected. We actually did a large push after that meeting to get it, and taking into consideration some of the communications items that were pointed out during this meeting last month. We did another large push with more communication assets at play, and we also included our principals and several staff members at their schools to encourage them to be involved in getting these connections going. So as of right now, we have 2,743 families connected. I said as of right now, that is actually as of the October billing, which is the most up-to-date information that I have on families that are actually connected. That's the information that was provided to us by Cox as far as the ones that the district is paying for. We'll get another update of those numbers at the end of November. That big push that we just did. So as of right now, we are sitting at 53%, which is actually less of a percentage, but it's of a larger number. And so we had connected more families between our September billing and the one that we received at the end of October. About 274 more families were connected, but then we did the large push after that billing statement. So as soon as I get that information at the end of November, we should have a really good picture of where we are. I can tell you that after that communication went out, and again, after we involved our principals and social workers and even some of our language translators in that effort, there was a lot of activity, a lot of families reaching out to us saying, hey, this didn't quite work for us, and then we would help them through that. So I do know that the number is actually a lot higher than the most recent billing suggests, but we don't have a way of quantifying it until that billing comes in.
What were some of the things that your principals, social workers, and translators found out about why people weren't connected?
So the chief reason that we ran into with families that were having difficulty connecting, the chief reason was an outstanding bill. We connected them with some community resources that have offered to help out the ones that have an outstanding bill. In some cases, they were able to help out. In other cases, they weren't able to help out. In a couple of other cases, it was address mismatch. Either they had moved and not had updated their had moved and not updated their land address with us, or other mismatches in that they had changed the address in our student information system, but left on the apartment number when they were no longer in an apartment. So mismatches like that caused some data issues. Those were relatively easy to clean up, turn right around and get the family connected. So again, I think those will be reflected in those numbers. Involving our principals and involving our social workers also gave them an opportunity to work directly with somebody instead of just doing this process. Again, as I alluded to in our last meeting, there's a bit of a challenge in that we're reaching out to people who need internet access, and their way of connecting to it is through the internet. And so by connecting these other resources, they were able to use these other resources to help get them connected, actually go through the process with them in person. So I'm pretty excited about where we are. I don't have actual numbers to share with you, but I do think that at the end of the month billing that we get should clearly reflect those additional efforts that were put into place. And as you can tell from our more recent news at 501, this was none too soon, because we have many families who are now dependent upon those connections that they were able to make now dependent upon those connections. I will say that today and last week, we did have a number of families who did not respond to the initial, not the initial push, but the push we did after the last meeting, who were kind of catching up last week, and we were able to get a couple of them connected as well. There's a few that are still going to be working through the process. It's not there yet, but we're definitely making some headway.
Were you getting any insights on those split home kids or the kids that are
Not really. I hadn't taken any phone calls about split home students this time, which was odd because when we first did the launch, we had several of them, as I mentioned in the last meeting. But so far, none of the ones from this last push had indicated that as being a barrier for them. So I'm not sure to the extent that I'm sure that is an issue because we have many split home in our school district. But whether or not both homes don't have internet, I haven't heard with this last push that was an issue.
Okay, maybe we could, I'm sure we'll be back with you, but I'm
gonna stay on the call.
We invited Reva Waiwatas to talk about what's happening to the extent that they know with the various home care providers. I think she's done some checking. Reva?
Well, I have a tiny bit of information, but I haven't had time to do anything other than just gather some anecdotal information from our team. We currently have 337 licensed child care programs in Shawnee County. That includes family child care and family group care facilities that are operated out of a residence. As well as child care centers, preschools, and licensed before and after school care programs. We have a number of those that are temporarily closed. Some of them just operate during the summer, for example. And we have some that are temporarily closed right now just due to COVID-related issues. And so, again, I just found out about this meeting on Friday, and then we had a weekend. So I just reached out to our staff and asked if they were hearing from any of the providers that they were working with or talking to about concerns with connectivity. And they said yes, that they were hearing some, but I don't have like anything that says certain days of the week, certain hours of the day, certain parts of the community. What I do know is that with so many people connecting to the internet, both folks that are working from home and then all of our kids that are doing remote learning, it doesn't seem like the internet connectivity is something that can always be counted on. And I've noticed even at my home, I'll be at home working, and every once in a while get a pop-up that says weak signal or unstable connection or something like that. So we are all, just like everyone else, doing the very best we can. And it's certainly not an ideal situation, but if there's specific things this committee would like to know, we would be happy to try to gather additional information and data for you.
Thank you for that. We stay on the line. There'll probably be questions now and then maybe later as well. Let's have Dawn speak up as well, and then we'll open up for questions from the committee.
Sure. We have 3 remote learning centers open today. One is in Montera. We received notification at 3 o'clock on Friday that Pauline Central was closing down to remote learning. And we have 52 kids over there. Adams Club has currently 58 kids in our remote learning program, and our teen center has the capacity of 60 kids, and as of today, I believe we have 47 teens there right now. We had a lot of challenges on our first go around with remote learning. Needed to do a lot of enhancements with our firewall. We needed to install a number of different points of access. Just because at any given time we had 50 Zoom calls going, at the same time. And so we have worked very collaboratively with Cox, as well as with our IT administrator to address all of those issues, and to knock on wood today, based upon upon what we've learned first go around, all of our kids have had excellent access, no interruptions, and have been able to fully participate in all of their classes and all of their Zoom meetings today so far.
That's really good. And based on what's been going around, did it cost you anything?
Yes, ma'am. But I would like to give kudos to Reva and Child Care Aware for funding through COVID relief dollars, SMART dollars. I'm not really quite sure which bucket that comes from, but that has really allowed us to address the necessary costs that it took in order to serve the kids the way that we should be. So thank you, Reva.
Well, that's good news. That's good to hear. Part of what the committee wanted to do is sort of feel like whether the dots were getting connected in a way that was making the intended difference in the community. Committee members, do you have questions, or is there somebody I missed regarding our students? Both. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I put a couple of guinea pigs to work last month with Megan's help. I wanted to make sure Megan was telling me right. She knows I love her. And I tell you what, and I'll let Karen tell her own story. And Reva, I think by you listening and being a participant in these meetings, you'll learn what we've learned already. We had a board member, I won't say who, got kicked off. And so I said, can you be my guinea pig? He has 3 kids in his cell. Come to find out he had bad wiring, which Megan said, and he needed a new router. And now he's fine. He's up and he's running. People are not knowing that they're free, they're coming out setting this up free. We need to get that word out to them. If you are having problems, and Megan can explain it again of what she talked about last time, the extensions, it might be an old system or whatever. These are very, very crucial things. Now, when people have called me, they don't want to hear that. They think they're fine. And then I said, well, you keep having problems and give me a call back. And then when they do, Megan, they're like, oh, okay, you know. So that's the thing. That's part of the challenge, because Megan is saying there's plenty enough room for people. We have a scale, and we've got plenty of room for all these people to be on Zoom. And maybe they'll be afraid to chime in, but we need to make sure that word gets out, because either people aren't understanding, they're trying to do it on their own system or whatever. And I'm grateful for the team. I'm grateful for everybody's input. We need those. We need to hear those. We need to continue to be out in the field to get these kids where they need to be. As far as some of the other participants, they did have the money challenge, and I think 501 for pushing that again. We might not be shy, Scott, on pushing it again, because there's still people that are missing it that are saying, oh, really? Especially now that we've gone back to remote. So I would not hesitate to do that big push, and we thank you for that. But I'm excited just to hear that more people are getting on, more kids, more access. This isn't going to stop. This isn't a conversation that's going to stop. We just have to educate. And I think Megan did that the first 2 meetings. Everybody, Megan, I want to say thank you. Said, hey, call her, she'll handle it. Everybody came back and said how you're wonderful and you've done a great job. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to break that barrier down and continue to get it out there. So team, let's keep this up. Let's keep this up. And I'm excited about the numbers as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Dobler.
Thank you. Scott, quick question. I had last week, I think it was, just an anecdotal story from a 501 classroom. It was about secondhand, so I think it's probably fairly accurate. The word came down that 501 was probably going back online this week. Came from a teacher who said 2 of her 15 or 18 students did not have internet. But I know you're getting the word out in a lot of ways, but is there a way
We thought you were kicking your desk.
I think I heard most of it. So if I could paraphrase and make sure that I caught the important parts, and just kind of let me know if that's the case. The anecdote that you were sharing was that a teacher was aware of students in her classroom, his or her classroom, and had a couple students who did not have reliable internet access, and wanted to know what process the teacher could use in order to be able to reach out and make sure that student gets access to the resources that they need. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's it perfectly, Scott.
Okay, good. So the answer to that is, yeah, there's a couple of options. First of all, the communication that we sent out through principals and also through the full staff does say that our office is the central communication point, which clarified the point that was previously made at the last meeting, that several people were confused about contacting Cox directly, and we do need to work through my office on these issues. And so we did share out with the staff that they can reach out to us, identify specific families. Not all families will qualify for the offer that we have through Cox. For example, today I talked to a family that does not qualify. They did not have internet. They needed some sort of a home option available to them. And we actually sat down and we went through different providers that would be available to them. We referred them to Cox. We also talked about the wireless service that they use might have an option. And at the end of the phone call, she had two strategies that she was going to use to contact those two companies to see what would be the best and quickest option for them to get connected. Because again, unfortunately, we can't cover people who don't really qualify for our program, but we can certainly point them in the right direction to get them the services that they need and as quickly as possible. I hope that answered your question. Teachers can reach out to our office on behalf of students. In fact, we have had a number of teachers, social workers, librarians, principals, other staff members who have reached out in the context of that larger communication push we did since the last meeting.
Great. That answers the question. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
I'll ask another while you're still up front. Now, all of the students have their own school-issued iPads or some sort of a pad, right?
Yeah, they either have an iPad or they have a Chromebook.
Okay. I think what Councilwoman Ortiz was trying to get me to tell, and maybe this applies more to these other categories than the students, is that I've done really well at home, and then periodically it's just a disaster. And it's not always with the message that was referenced earlier about the weak signal or whatever. And it turns out that I never thought having something that was 5 years old was old, but apparently my laptop is old. And my primary operating system is Internet Explorer. So I was on a meetup, I think it was, or a Teams meeting that was disastrous. And it was embarrassing, of course, and then an hour later was on a Zoom meeting that was fine. And so maybe with the students, it wouldn't be their particular school-issued equipment, but instead if the family was using the family computer or something like that, are you running into hardware issues? And we can ask Megan the same thing. I know that the experience with Cox, like we had Megan send Cox out to my house too. They said, well, nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. You should be fine. Just make sure your computer's near the router and you'll be fine. But it wasn't that simple.
So we had,
go ahead.
So we actually have done a couple of things in that regard, because you're right. They may not be connecting with our device. They may be connecting with their own device at home, which they may feel to be more reliable. Very often what we're finding is when they are experiencing challenges, it's not so much the age of the device that they're on, although that can contribute, as much as it is whether or not the browser that they're using has the latest extension.
Exactly.
Zoom is notorious for making an upgrade to their product, and that upgrade being based upon the most recently available extensions in Google, for example. And so we have we produce some parent training materials that we readily make available to our families. And if they call our office, for example, and have a question about it, that'll be one of the first things we identify as a very likely cause for their connectivity issues. And so it's not always necessarily the age of the equipment as it is the browser software that they're using could just be a month out of date and still contribute to a negative experience in a video conversation.
Yeah, because depending on people's phones or their computers, they don't necessarily have the capacity to add more apps.
Correct.
And so figuring out how to do that. So are the materials that you have something everyone else could see too? Speaking of networking?
They're publicly available on our website.
Okay.
Other resources, so absolutely, as we're talking about some of these other groups, I have absolutely no problems with other groups referring to our materials. We are at first and foremost an educational institution.
Well, that's awesome. We probably can't call you up and get you to walk us through, but at least it's a start.
It would be a start in the right direction.
Let's plug Mike Siebert into this because he's also dealing with kids in foster care before we move on to some of these other topics. See what Mike's got to say.
Actually, I'm not quite sure how it linked up to me working with kids in foster care.
Uh-oh.
I work exclusively with the work program.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But what is key to me, and I did send Dawn a private message about access to the locations, if she checked on that and respond with the teen centers. But what's important to me is that everyone has that opportunity to obviously have internet, and when people are working from home plus going to school, the drain on the system is extremely difficult. I know back in March, and I live outside the city, but I had a horrible time, sorry Megan, with Cox. I called them over and over and over again, and they kept telling me basically that, well, one of them wanted me to upgrade my power, and I was like, that's not the issue. That won't solve the fact that I'm being disconnected on a consistent basis. And what I found was, and this is something that we can encourage our constituency to do, is to make sure that they have Cox check the stations that they have. I had a box out in front of my house that was affecting 3 other houses, and the same thing was happening. And the corrosion on it, even though I thought it was rather new, was immense. And fortunately, since that problem's been resolved, that hasn't been an issue. But that can be a problem on the outside, and it's not necessarily Cox's fault because they have to do a lot of digging to find it. In fact, they found, I think, one other one. But to encourage people just to, kind of let Cox know if it isn't an indoor problem, that it could be something that's on the outside, and to really encourage them that way. But my big concern is that the parents have access to internet so that they can do their work. And then, obviously, if they're going to have to be having their kids go to school from home, that they can dually do that and have enough transfer of information so that they all equally can do what needs to be done. Because the parents don't need the additional stress of not being able to work and trying to teach their kids at the same time how to get on and off the computers.
Thanks, and we'll
That's
come.
my 2 cents.
And we'll come back to you when we get to the workforce one. I'm sorry, I made the wrong assumption. Is there anybody on that's working with foster kids? Okay. Any more questions about kids? We can come back to it, but services for kids in school or out of school right now. All right, let's move on to seniors. I see Deborah Dawkins is on. We missed her at the introductions. Deborah, you want to talk about anything further with seniors?
I would say that most of the seniors, and especially at my biggest concern is at the senior center when we're trying to do some remote things. And, that's something that I'm working because we're in a county building, Parks and Rec building, I've been working with them, trying to see what we could do. But basically the same type of issues that have been expressed earlier of, we're in the middle of a Zoom session and it freezes and we hear the internet is unstable and, that becomes a bit frustrating. But other than that, the seniors have expressed the same type of issues at their individual homes.
You had made a
So
really
that's great.
compelling case for the issues at home, that if people were needing to get on for social interaction, to just physically act, Zumba, those sorts of things, that connection was really important.
Yes, and so they are experiencing it just like I am at home. Right now I'm on my cell phone, but sometimes when I'm on my my laptop, and I have a brand new laptop. In fact, we bought a brand new laptop for our Zoom purposes, and I still experience the connectivity, the stalling and I guess it's just because it's, the Wi-Fi and it's a public Wi-Fi, so, people might be in the parking lot accessing it or whatever.
Megan, you want to react to that? Do we just need to learn more about this stuff?
I don't know about that. I think again, it goes back to what has been said previously, and thank you, Councilwoman Ortiz and everyone. We are happy to respond to any technical assistance, to any problems that you may have in your home. As Mike mentioned, obviously it took maybe a second call for us to figure out the problem with him. But at the end of the day, it's technology. It's not magic. There are inevitably going to be problems. We encourage you to call us. We will help you figure out what the problem is and whether it is a network issue with us, whether it's a line coming into your home or whatever, maybe outside your home. We are happy to investigate that and fix that. And we want to fix it because at the end of the day, we don't want you to be paying for poor quality service. And I'm sure AT&T would say the exact same thing if they were here as well. So whether your provider is Cox or AT&T or somebody else. That would be my first thing. Please give us a call. Let us know. We do want to provide you a good quality service. We do want to be helpful, and we want to help solve those problems that you may have. So again, my contact information is widely available. And I even sent a chat message to Mike and said, send me your contact information. So you as well, Reva, and other folks, if you have specific addresses or issues, please let us know. Call our customer care center directly as well.
Let me follow up with this issue about operating systems and browsers. I've not heard you report or anybody else that the Cox techs went farther than it looks like everything's fine, your wiring's fine, your service is fine, I read my little meter, you have plenty of bandwidth, and maybe you need a new router, but not going as far as helping people problem solve about their hardware and their operating systems. Does that, I don't want you to overpromise. Any answer's okay.
I can't speak to what our protocols and procedures are in terms of that, but I know our first priority is ensuring that your network and the wires and the line coming into your house is that you're getting a good signal, that you're getting a good service, and we can help explain whether it's a hardware issue or it's another issue. We're happy to work with you on that.
Okay. So I had one of your top of the line people who just sort of said, it's all go, pat me on the shoulder and left. He even ran a new service line to the house. I mean, he was awesome, but nobody, we kind of, as you know, got into this issue about, well, maybe it's people's, as we wrapped up last time, what about their own stuff? And not wanting to call Scott because they think it's going to cost them money if they got to get a new computer, or, once you call that repairman, you know how that goes, and pretty soon you owe lots of money, and this concern about not opening that door and getting themselves in deeper than they thought they'd be. And so just checking, this is some networking. We'll keep on passing around the room here and seeing what else we get. Thank you. Any questions before we go on to about seniors? Anybody else have reports on seniors before we go to career seekers? Okay. We invited some folks that were from the workforce networking cohort. I'm not sure I see anybody on, with the exception now that I've got you in the right bucket, Mike Siebert. What are we hearing? Anybody hearing anything, no matter what your name tag says, on job seekers being able to fill out applications, find out about jobs, get connected as they need to? Any anecdotal things to share? Otherwise, we'll keep going.
I have not heard of anybody having issues at this point in time, being able to get hooked up. I know the Workforce Center continues to be available by appointment. They may have changed that this week. I know our office had to send several of us home to work from home, but because it could only allow so many people on a floor, I guess. But I think if someone wants to work in this city right now, there are so many opportunities that they just have to be willing to go after them. I've never seen so many help wanted signs as I have over the last 6 months.
Thank you. I mean, at the beginning, the library was closed, and there are a lot of people that don't have internet that use the library a lot. I'm sure it got in the way then. They're still open, at least for the time being.
Right.
Okay.
Karen?
Yes. Sorry.
Lizone?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, on that workforce piece, you know, listening to Mr. Gowan, you know, and others, I think there's a service that's available for everyone. There just has not been a campaign to better educate people on what is available, so they know how they fall into the where they would fall into. So even though there may be jobs out there, that doesn't mean that every job seeker has a computer or have internet access. Maybe there needs to be some better way of coordinating, because these students at 501 have a parent which may be receiving cash assistance or food assistance, which DCF has graciously accepted to assist in that manner there. If, like on those who could not get the service because of an outstanding bill, maybe that is the household.
Lizone, if you could really speak slowly, you are breaking up, and so it's hard to follow. Of all people.
Can you hear me now?
Better?
I'm not perfect. But maybe those with the outstanding bill, maybe they're eligible for assistance through DCF because they receive TANF or cash assistance. So just trying to make sure that everyone knows that all of the options that are available. Job seekers still have to apply online most of the time, even if there's a lot of jobs out there. There still may be only so many that can go online at a time in a home where a lot of Zoom calls are at. So hopefully between USD 501 and DCF, both of them having some type of an option available for the most vulnerable in our home, in these homes, that we can find some type of way to make sure that everyone who could be covered isn't covered. So some type of a campaign to get out campaign to get out so people maybe are aware of it. It's great that young people can go to a center, and I think they're doing something in the Highcrest area. But I'm a big advocate of having internet in the home if it's available and adequate. And so I would just like to, that's why it's bridging the gap. Those who cannot or are not being served by COPS or 501 or any other, then we can really see, okay, how does this option fit in to help? Unfortunately, there may not be someone for foster youth here, but foster youth are provided a computer and I think a printer in a class, but that maybe they should have internet access to. I know the person, Mike probably knows the person with the foster care, where you can reach out and try to figure that out so that not everybody will be covered, maybe, but you're right, there are some out there that are eligible. They may not be eligible through 501 or COPS because of limitations, but that doesn't mean that there's not some other things. So hopefully, as we better understand who we are, what we offer, we can then better, because when I'm working with someone, I can promote and let them know that COPS has a service available and DCF has a service available. And then we can find out where's the best fit and try to get them that access to the services. That's it.
Thank you. Well, part of the goal of gathering everybody together here, the best that we've been able to get a group is to see if there are gaps out there, and if so, what they are. And so it's sounding like we're doing all right. Susan, I overlooked you when we asked about seniors. Do you have anything to contribute? No obligation?
I would just, sorry, my camera hits that sun. I would just add that I think that we may have an issue with older adults with regards to just familiarity and want and ability to use the technology to connect, especially with more and more doctor's appointments now being through telemedicine and telehealth. We are hearing from older adults that if I have to go to the doctor via the computer, I'm just not going to do it because they're not familiar with, some of them are not familiar with that technology and not really wanting to mess with it. So I think part of an issue that the older adults will have is, in addition to the connectivity and all the other issues that any age population has, but just education, somebody helping them learn how to use that technology and how to get on and get to that doctor's visit online, or those Zoom classes that the senior centers may be offering, how to actually utilize the technology pieces that they have.
That's good. I mean, even when we all get the little pop-ups like, do you give this camera permission for this camera to access your computer? No. You don't know whether a yes or a no is dangerous for you.
Right. Yeah, and I think some of that may be fear, like, oh yeah, what do I pick? Oh my gosh, it just didn't just happen. I had to answer a question, or I had to click something to make something happen. And so I think just the education piece of showing folks how to use it is going to be a difficulty that we'll see with older adults.
Okay.
You've got some older adults that have been using technology and are great with it, but then you've got some that haven't and don't really want to, but are being forced with having to maybe have to utilize it.
Right. Okay, let's move on then. We can always loop back. Our goal here is to figure out by the end of this hour where we are, and I'll just share that. At least Neil and I talked about this. The idea is who's going to take this forward. We didn't ever expect this committee to be managing this agenda forever, but we felt there was a need in the community and a need to bring people together. So again, thank you to everyone. The next item we have on the agenda is service and infrastructure. And this all started when Councilman Dobler thought maybe we needed more conduit, to run lines through existing conduit or something like that. Are there any issues, City Manager, Councilman Dobler, anybody else, about actually the physical aspects of getting service to people? for Megan? None from city manager? Anything, councilman? Anybody else? You know, up here in the top, on the 501 line, we had bulleted T-Mobile in there as an option. These hotspots and so on.
Yeah, we have about 1,127 that are on the way to us. They haven't arrived yet, but those are an option that we're going to offer out for those students that are in a situation that is a little less consistent. Homeless students come to mind. Another student that might come to mind might be the student that has two houses that they're needing service at, but they don't know which one they're going to be at any given day. That might be a better candidate for some of these resources.
Okay.
They're a little more limited. This particular offer from T-Mobile is limited to 100 megabytes of total data. I'm sorry, 100 gig of total data over the course of a year. And so we have to be a little bit more strategic about how those are used. But they are certainly available as a temporary solution. Once they get here, they will certainly be available as a temporary solution for those families still waiting to connect. But for those families that need a longer term multi-point solution that we can't quite get with the one residence offer, then we want to have these available as flexible. So having T-Mobile on there was part of our conversation last month. They're just not here yet.
Okay, and are those being paid for by COVID money or how?
They are, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, those are being paid for in the same way we're paying for the COX out of the combination of the Commerce Grant and other sources of CARES money.
Okay. Which leads us right into our next item. How are we doing on?
Pillar, sorry. Council, it's Megan Bottenberg.
Okay.
I just wanted to update real quick on
Okay.
the service expansion that we have going on up northern Shawnee County, just north of Topeka city limits in the Seaman School District. We previously discussed about 300 homes and lots will have a Cox service by the end of the year. We are on track for that. The needed permits by several different groups were approved Friday. So progress is continuing and we hope to have that going and installed by the end of the year as long as weather remains great.
Wonderful. And to be honest, I'm not certain. This says GTP Sparks second round funding. So if that means more to other people than it does to me, please speak up. Or if there is other CARES money that people were watching for. Okay.
I do. I raised my hand to clap for what Megan just shared about more places because our last conversation, that was something that was being worked on. But I had a question for Scott, and it kind of goes back to the work program issue a little bit. But I know that I live in the Seaman School District, and I know that they allow special need type situations to still be on campus. Is 501 allowing that kind of situation, or kids that are a little bit more difficult and need a little bit more attention to be in a classroom in a safe environment? Or is everybody at home at this current time with 501? Or you're not sure yet?
So I'm going to go ahead and answer that as best as I can based upon the conversations that I've been a part of. As I understand it, schools do have the flexibility to still have high need situations being addressed in that way. As I understand it, it may be that I am not privy to all of the conversations though. Sometimes people realize IT's got a lot going on. And so I don't always get included in every meeting. So it's possible that a decision has changed on that. But as I understood it, the schools will still have the flexibility for those high need situations that do not lend themselves well to the distance learning, to still being done in an alternative way.
Awesome. That's encouraging to know. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, let me respin this item since I'm doing my best with it without knowing as much as I could. Is there a need for more funding? And if so, is it, are people expecting it at this point? Scott?
I would say that between now and December, we might be in a situation where we don't need additional funding. But all of the funding sources that we're using to kind of put these things together have a drop dead date of the end of December. And so I think that we need to lobby for extensions of those deadlines, as well as potentially extending the funding sources. Because I don't think this is going away as of the end of December if we don't have COVID numbers right now that lend themselves well to a decline in what's going on in our community. I think it's safe to say this is going to last beyond December. And so I think our funding sources need to match that potential duration.
Can anybody else pitch in on that? My familiarity is more like what the city can get for city kinds of things. And we had, and JADO, we had some things that were drop dead by the end of the year, but others that had 18 months in them and are lasting. So I'm not sure I know the difference all the time. Neil?
Thank you. I'm wondering if maybe this is a discussion that we have after we talk about kind of the leadership or committee structure going forward, because it seems like that's something that it's going to take a long time to identify. A long time, but it's going to take a while to identify where we need funding and what those potential sources might be. Whether it's the GTP or some combination committee going forward, seems like that'd be something for them to take a stab at. Thank you.
Thank you. I think what we were doing at this point was just establishing what we knew about where we were right now. So what I'm hearing is maybe enough money for the end of the year, but kind of unknown. Is there any money that people know of that's available for 2021 for COVID-related connectivity? And then
This is Megan Plattenberg. I'll just say we've been following this issue in DC to see if there would be additional funds available at the federal level that then would be dispersed down to the state and local level like it was in round one or during 2020. At this moment, all I know is that we should know more maybe this week. Congress just returned today after their election break. I believe it's December 11th is one of the funding deadlines on the federal level, right around that point, December 10th or December 11th. If there is additional funding, relief funds dispersed or available, it would probably most likely be at that point for 2021. Or the deadline extension would occur then at that point as well. So I think you may see some more information come through Congress in the next few weeks. But at this point, we just don't have enough information at the federal level due to the election break.
Okay, and I am not online. There was a message from Riva. Okay. Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz, did you have something to add?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to see this on our agenda next month or at our next meeting so we can regroup and recap. I think this is very important for all of us to continue this discussion. I think we've come a long way, and I think we could even come on further along. Just wanted to make sure that we were headed that way as well. That we make sure that this is on our next agenda as well.
And we just lost Councilman Dobler briefly anyway. Are you thinking that we wait until next month to talk about future?
Yes, I do. I think the discussion that we've had today is great. I think that'll give Scott time to even make his smile more bigger with the numbers. I think it'll give Megan more time since she's watching the money, and any other participants that we have, Lazone can kind of start getting the word out there even more. I think this is great discussion. When I look at how far we've really come off of just the beginning of a discussion of our kids need this, and we're so far in advance, but there's still a little bit of work. So if we can just get it on our next agenda and have everybody
come together, I think that would be excellent.
Okay, and I'm looking at my calendar here. If what Megan says is that the 10th and 11th of December may be really critical dates, then I don't know that we would have tried to have this meeting any sooner, but the 14th or the 21st would give time for the congressional action to have occurred. Just kind of keep that in mind.
Well, and even not just all the other updates that we could potentially have would be awesome.
Okay. Is there any
Thank
other discussion or information that people wanted to offer on the broadband issue today before we wrap up this issue?
Yes, Karen.
Okay.
Lazone.
Yes. Thank you.
Just for clarity, the provision that allows the DCF to purchase computers, internet for those food stamps, cash assistance isn't COVID funds, so therefore it doesn't have that same December 30th date looming onto it. And so I just wanted to mention that so that we can look further into May, June of next year. This was a provision that got back several years. So I just wanted to mention that even if there are funds, maybe we have to revisit if there are no more funds, or at least 501 and Mike are in the same space here, and then they can connect and talk about that, so that if internet access in the home, because the parents are getting it, because there's no more funds for kids, the internet is still in the home, so the kids still have access to it. That doesn't take away from having to follow and advocate for additional funds, but I just wanted to at least make sure that people realize that not all funds are created equal.
Thank you.
And they don't all have the same deadline.
I kind of missed, you spoke for DCF, but I'm not sure what you said because you cut out.
I think he was saying that the
What I
DCF funds are
said-
not ending in December, that they continue into 2021, correct, Lazone?
Yes, what I'm saying is that the DCF funds are not COVID funds. So they don't have that same December 30th stipulation that you're talking about.
Oh, they're not even COVID funds, those are state
Those are
funds?
TANF.
Okay, they're TANF money, okay. Okay. Anything else? I do know that when we come back in December, Lazone has explored a couple of models for longer-term collaborations. Obviously, whoever wants to be on such a collaboration would need to be somebody who feels like there's a need and has some time to do that. So, did you have something else before we go, Lazone?
Yes, I do believe that Heartland Works should be a part of the discussion because they have the same provision where they can assist using the funds that they have for people that are involved in their job training program as well.
Thank you. We did invite Kathy today, but I don't know if Liz, were you able to follow up? Okay. We sent out emails to some of the workforce folks, but might not have worked for today. So thank you. We'll continue to do that. And if anybody has ideas for others who might make good contributions to this conversation, if you would let Liz know at etoyne@topeka.org. Liz is the person who's been sending out our emails. Then Liz can make sure and add those folks to, and she's messaging her email address right now. We can add those folks to the invitation list next time. Okay. Well, with that, we will wrap up broadband discussion for today. Thank you, everyone. You're welcome to stay. Bless his heart, Mike Haugen's been waiting for us to get done talking about broadband, so we'll move on to code compliance issues. Okay. The issue that we have before us today for property maintenance code is to talk about what next steps we might want to take and to review possible language for a report out. I had gone ahead for at least format purposes. Do you have it? The drafted items that I had? Okay. And I do not have them available to post on the online. What we've been looking at is looking at what we worked on, for those who weren't here, property maintenance code issues for all year long, actually. Did a lot of research and so on. We were going to do public hearings this summer, and with COVID, that just didn't work out. So ultimately, the committee members said, why don't you draft something up and let's start with that. And so that's where we are. And what I sent out in advance to the committee members was that it seemed that out of all the discussions, in short, to strengthen code compliance, we needed to, well, let me back up a little bit. We've also, at the same time as this committee has been doing all this work, there has also been a group, there was a housing study done that identified numbers of housing in the community that were not both quality and affordable. Defining affordable as under $700 a month, so quality was pretty much the deciding factor on those. I might not be thinking of everything else that's gone on at the same time. We've certainly wanted efficiencies and economies. The council looked at some things during budget time as well. So the 4 items that seem to have drilled out of those conversations were a citywide beautification and vegetation program, protocols for complete interior inspections, mothballing standards for structures that are expected to be held vacant, and a restructured system of consequences and resource assistance to optimize compliance. Those seemed, however, with all the conversation that we'd had, a little too simple, and so more of a SMART goals approach to putting them out with some possible steps to get to those goals seemed a better way to introduce them. So what people have is a proposal that people, the committee members can read and work from. Overall, those are set up based on an assumption that our goals for code compliance are safety of people, protection of structures, and maintenance of an attractive environment and property values. And also an assumption, operations-wise, that we want to be straightforward, kind, and fair. We want to be cost-effective, and we want to be fully integrated with other departments and services. The draft then says that an aspirational goal could be to bring up the quality of structures and premises in Topeka, Kansas, so that code violations in structures and on premises are the exception rather than the rule, that our number of substandard properties is never over 500, that owners are motivated to take care of properties before code is even called, and that our staff requirement is ultimately not more than 6 for the program. The challenges were respun with some detail to say, number 1, reduce the current number of 4,300 substandard structures down to 500 in 5 years. Number 2, reduce deterioration in vacant structures. Number 3, reduce the expense and revenue gap on abatement cases from a $500,000 loss annually to 0. And number 4, to improve the appearance of the community through management of uncultivated and overgrown vegetation, such that the average resident or visitor would score Topeka's property appearance on at least 7 on a scale of 10, and the police department would rate 80% or more of the properties as in compliance with CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design principles, within 3 years, at the same time reducing the amount of tree and shrub abatements by both code compliance and forestry by at least 50%. And there's some detail on each of those. Neil Dobler is here, and Sylvia are here from the committee, Mike Haugen from Code, and City Manager. Where do you want to start on discussion? I know that I did hear back from Councilman Dobler, just that he thought that the SMART goals were the way to go. Had some general support, but wanted to talk through particularly the first one. So we could start there if you like.
Who is it you're asking?
Pardon me? It was
Are you
Councilman
asking me?
Dobler.
Are you asking me?
I was asking Councilman Dobler, but if he's not answering. He might have stepped out for a second. Okay. Councilwoman Ortiz, did you, maybe we just need to stall a little bit till Councilman Dobler's back so that we're all in on the conversation.
That's fine, because I really want to make sure I understand where you're going with this and that we get a clear understanding. I apologize, Karen. This poison ivy's got my eyes very irritable, so I'm not being able to do a lot of reading like I want to. So I did read it, I put it down, I read some more and put it down, kind of skimmed through it, basically.
Okay.
So if we can kind of do that, I think that'd be fair to you.
Mike has been ill, actually. Mike, are you feeling okay? And did you get a chance to get through it?
Yeah, I'm better.
Oh, good. Okay. We've needed to get back to this, but Councilwoman, if you're feeling like you weren't able to get through it and it's difficult today, maybe we need to go ahead and hold it at this point. I've been joking a little.
You can talk about it and I can listen, you know, if you want to do that. Let's take one at a time.
Yep. Let's get Councilman Dobler back and we'll talk about it some.
I mean, why we're slated for time, because I did skim through it. I'm just saying there could be something I missed because I didn't read it like I wanted to. Does that make sense? Poison ivy and eyes don't mix. I just learned that. Mike's shaking his head no. Maybe he knows more than I do.
No, I just happened to look to the left.
Well, Councilwoman Ortiz described to me what had happened, and it's the kind of thing that we all hope will never happen, and that was that she had this one weed left in the middle of a bush, and there it was green, everything else was gone, so she did what most of us would do, is reached out, pulled it up, and then wadded it up in her hands, and it turned out to be poison ivy. What a mess.
Yeah. Then I wiped the sweat off my face.
Mm-hmm. Councilman Dobler had messaged a little earlier that he needed to take a short break, and then I don't think he did. And so maybe he waited till the end of the broadband.
Mike, I'll send you an email. I want to talk to you about Southeast 10th Street. That area's getting pretty bad again.
Okay.
I drove it and got scared and came home. You know, I'm not a scary person. We got a lot of couches out there.
It's never ending. I thought about starting a coffee table book called Mattresses of Topeka, since there's so many mattresses that show up every week.
I don't understand why they don't put it out, because it's not like you find the whole set. You only find one or two.
Absolutely. They're just illegally dumping the furniture wherever they feel safe to do it without getting caught.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I went down 10th Street, it's going back to I-70 and then back down go to 3310, Southeast 10th Street, and then going back towards Volume Shoe. Well, I still call it Volume Shoe. It's even down their road, the dead end road. So you got to go in both ways.
No, absolutely. That's been a traditional dumping spot where we've talked about getting video, which isn't feasible. We place signs out there saying you're going to be video recorded. It's a great street to do things if you don't want to be caught by the law.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Neil,
We will go out. We'll go out tomorrow though and see what we got.
Neil, we've been waiting for you to get back. So,
Sorry, I had a phone call there that I had to take. So.
That's okay. Thank you. Well, we thought we'd go through these 4 challenges one at a time. You had read through and had some comments, and so maybe any questions or comments on the 4 SMART goal proposals?
Yeah, first of all, I think these are goals that make sense, that we can potentially achieve over time. I think we need a lot of discussion on it. Probably Mike, maybe a couple of years worth of discussion on your part. No reaction. I guess the one I have a little bit of concern with is number 1, and maybe you've talked about this already, but the idea of reducing 4,300 substandard structures down to 500 in 5 years. I kind of went through some math earlier. I think that's 700 plus structures a year for those 5 years with our kind of limited staff, and I think that might take some doing. So just wanted to consider other alternatives, like do we upsize the staff through some method for a period of time? Do we outsource? What are some of the options to really start addressing those substandard structures?
And may I chime in?
Before
okay,
you do,
so the 4,300 is 4,300 per year.
No.
That's how many we're citing per year on housing cases. To cut it to 500, I'm at a loss. These properties are there, and we are already going on a second round of properties to get into compliance. And as 5 years has gone on, their porch wasn't in violation when we originally cited them, but now their porch is in violation. Or their gutters weren't in violation, and now they're guttered. So we're continually at 4,300 structures a year on housing violations. I would not know how to get it down to 500 because they're out there. We're not making them up. We're finding them every year. We can find 1,200 a year if we had the staffing.
I think if I can chime in, actually, is 4,300 the number from you, from code compliance on how many you write up a year? Because I'll tell you where I got it was from the housing study.
Okay, that's approximately. I figured you got it from us. We've had years where we wrote 3,500. We've had years where we wrote 4,300. I can't tell you how many we wrote in this given year. I can try to pull it up. but that's on target. We write, and on average, 8,000 to 10,000 various cases per year, and a big chunk of them are housing cases. Right now, I'm looking at, for this year, I don't want to give you the wrong numbers on this, but we might be at 2,000 for 2020. I'd have to meet with my staff, make sure everything's accurate on that. But we're at about 2,000 this year. To reduce that to 500, I don't know. We have been very proactive with our housing cases, including from January 1 until March 1. When we find housing cases, we're sending letters out to the owners saying, hey, we found this violation. We're giving you 6 months of winter to make a plan of action to fix your house. And then we will return in the spring, and then that's when we will cite you. So we are trying to be proactive with our community and try to get these fixed in the repair months. But that's where we are. And I'm not sure how to reduce that to 500. I know that I have landlords, large landlords, that are selling their properties now, selling them in bulk because they are tired of dealing with us and having to make the repairs that we're requiring of them, including one of our biggest landlords sold all of his properties and walked out of the business. So, yeah, I don't know how to reduce that to 500. I can't even imagine. It's just nature. We have old houses that were built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Issues are going to continually pop up with those.
Neil?
Thank you. I mean, I guess I haven't been dealing with this as long as you guys have, but I mean, it seems like the issue is how can we move a house from, not the house itself, but the owner, from playing that game just in and out of compliance. They get in compliance and then something else falls apart and they're out of compliance. How do we get the majority of our housing stock to the point where it's not even close to being out of compliance? And I don't really think that's a code enforcement issue. I think that's a bigger issue. I don't know how exactly we go about addressing that, but I mean, just playing the games. Can I fix it up just enough to get it in compliance, but the next big windstorm or a couple of months down the road, you're out of compliance again? That is, man, that's a death spiral.
You're absolutely right. Most of the people we're dealing with are financially burdened. If you go to our municipal court hearings, you will be shocked at the financial situation of the people that end up going to court. And when I believe the prosecutor had 900 cases last year, this is a massive amount of number. We went from less than 100 cases up to what we're doing now. We've organized the system. We meet with the prosecutor. We work with the people. We provide our phone numbers, our contact information. During this Zoom meeting, I got off and I took a phone call from a gentleman north of me. He's got $150 of repairs. He can't do them until the first of the year. But we're going to work with him. He's providing us a plan of action. And that's what we have to do. Because I frankly will have to go to court if you're not going to give me time to make this and to save up the money by the first of the year. Most of the people we're dealing with are poor. That's the side of town that we're running into the largest slow compliance or repeat violation. And I have some sympathy for them. I understand what's going on. They have to get their house in compliance. But in return, there is reality. We're not going to turn around and jail our poor for being unable to maintain their homes.
Exactly. Like, do you have a gut feel on the percentage that are landlords versus the percentage that actually live in the house that is out of compliance?
That one's tough because I really thought that it was mainly landlords that were a problem. I had that hammered out in my constituents. Well, there's landlords in the area, but our landlords are fixing the properties that we cite. Now, the landlords aren't being proactive Like, I'm going to be proactive with my home and make sure that all of the stuff is done. The landlords aren't exactly always being proactive, but they're fixing it when it's cited because they do not want to go to court. Because one of the goals for court was if you are a bad landlord or a bad property owner, we will get you to court frequently. And the first time it's going to be a shame on you. The second time it's going to be, hey, we're going to fine you. And it will build and build to where there's serious fines. So landlords understand this, and they're taking care of the issue when we're finding them. To motivate them to be proactive, they're landlords. I can't, some of them are amazing. So before I say they're landlords, I have amazing landlords that are proactive and care. But we're talking about the ones that are going back, including the one that wholesaled out the largest amount of properties. I wouldn't say wholesale, sold out the largest amount of properties. The person that came in and bought them is focusing and targeting on one of our communities and neighborhoods of need that has been a neighborhood of need for, well, I don't know, since I've lived here, so since the 70s and 80s, out in Highcrest. And they have a massive amount now. They're setting up a game plan to purchase, to repair all these properties. They've come in and met with us. They've shared their game plan. They haven't shared what they're doing on each individual house, but every house that we have cited that they own is their first priorities, and then they'll move from there, and their goal is to improve the quality of housing within Highcrest with the 100 or more properties that they now own.
There you go. That's awesome.
Interesting.
And we've had that issue before, being afraid of somebody, like a landlord, selling off their properties, but if that person wasn't maintaining them, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
One of the things I say when a landlord says, I can't afford to fix it, say, well, then you need to sell some of your equity to fix your other equity. And that's what's been going on. Now, there's stubborn people that just won't do it, and they go to court, and then they find out, and they got to come up with a solution. But those are the conversations that we're having. And Chairman, I would like to go back and ask you a question, that in your aspirational goals, you said that our staff requirement is not more than 6 for the program. Were you talking about 6 inspectors?
Yep.
Okay, and you want to cut it to 6. Right now, my current 7, should be 8, are all backlogged with the amount of cases they're managing because of how efficient they're being, that when they walk in every single day, they have X amount of houses that they have to re-inspect, re-site, meet with, and to reduce that, you're going to reduce the amount of properties that we touch.
That's a long-term aspirational goal, Mike, and what you just described is the kind of thing, in my opinion, you have really been creative, and I know that you're totally passionate about having these neighborhoods improve. You have been long before you were even in this department. And so it's a matter of, no, we might need to do some things, get out of the proverbial box, do some things differently than we used to do. I go back far enough with code compliance here to where this town looked pretty good all the time. We had 3 inspectors and a supervisor. When people knew what the code was, and we were able to head off probably 50% of the tenant landlord inspections by simply being able to talk with the tenant and the landlord about what the code was, and if the inspector comes, they're going to write up everything. Now, if we get this resolved and so on. And so it's aspirational, but it's also based on history of here in Topeka. And it's not that we're not going to be able to get there by continuing to do business as usual. And so that's why I went ahead and took the time at the request of the committee and switched them from being just, well, let's make this better, to some aspirational overall goals and to more of a SMART goal format. Because for instance, in the 4,300 substandard structures, that would mean that we'd reduce by, and I didn't do the math on it, but roughly 1,100 a year. But the idea is, obviously, we know, I mean, it's been this way for a number of years, Mike, and recently, you touched on it earlier, if we keep going back to the same house, that's a lot of churn on the part of the cost of the city, the inspectors, the tickets, and so on. You all, Your inspectors do a phenomenal job, and so do you, with doing business the way we are. But we've got to change. Obviously, we're not getting very far, and so if we're not getting very far, we have to figure out a different way to tackle it. And that's why each of these are long enough, because what I tried to do was pull out the suggestions and observations that, and the pushback, frankly, from the conversations that we had to say, yeah, we know that, we have to figure this out, we have to figure this out, we have to figure this out. And it was clear that to tackle any of these four was going to take a multifaceted approach, not just a go straight from here to there like we have before. And truthfully, we needed to put these out and kind of chew through them here at the committee level and with you and city manager and whoever else. But if they're aspirational goals and you're setting a 5-year goal or whatever it might be, maybe it's 10, but then you challenge yourself for the first part of that time to really flesh out a plan of action, to think it through, and each one of these might require that kind of challenge. But that's one of the reasons we've been stuck, was we needed to come up with a different way to tackle this so that we literally improved the quality of the housing and the appearance of the city, and reduce the numbers of times we needed to go back and inspect, and reduce the number of times we went back and abated it ourselves on behalf of people never to be paid. Somehow there's things wrong with all those pieces, and so it's, okay, how do we structure a way to get this where we want it to be? Now, if what those aspirational goals are isn't where we want it to be, then that's different. But if what we want is all the properties in town to be safe, we want the structures to not be deteriorating even when they're not occupied, and we want an attractive environment that makes people want to live in houses and neighborhoods, and at least sustains, if not improves, property values. If that's what we want to do, then you say, all right, where are we right now? And let's start to break this into manageable pieces, maybe these 4, and then we'll have to work out a strategy that we can then activate in each one of them. So again, I took a first run at it at the request of the committee, but we want to walk through them and either tear them apart or improve them or whatever it takes. But if as a city we have those goals, so the issue about reducing the number of inspectors is simply, once you reduce the number of inspections you need to do and the number of properties that are run down, obviously one would think you could maintain with less inspectors. There's certainly not a suggestion that we cut your force right away and somehow make you, I can't believe how much you get done now. So it's not that, and it's not a criticism either. It's how can we work together to get this town where we want it to be?
Sure.
If that
so
helps.
at a risk of sounding defensive, and I don't mean to be, but over the past 5 years, we are not doing it as we've always done it. It has been a dynamic change from the day that I stepped in, and we're continuing to make changes to improve it. And before COVID, we were meeting weekly, and we were finding out where our shortcomings were, and we were improving them. And that's what we're going to continue to do. And we're meeting nationally and locally with other code enforcement throughout the country to find better solutions. We do not want to do it the same way. Our ability to gain compliance is tenfold what we used to be adversarial. And now phone calls coming in are how we work together. And that was what our goal was. I see in your number 1 that you talked about creating a program.
Can I stop you for a sec, Mike? You're breaking up. Is there a way you could get a little closer to your mic?
Hopefully, is this any better?
Yes, substantially.
Okay. So I'm totally supportive of improving our system any way that we can. I'm looking at some of the things where you posted that we need to have a system for interior inspection. We have one, and we do complete interior inspections. But you asked me one time if we do it 100% of the time. When you ask me 100%, I'm going to give you an honest answer and say we're not perfect. We are not Jesus. We will not do it 100% of the time. And it seems that you keyed on that and said, well, we need to have system. We do. And we, again, if we get together, we meet, we study what we're doing. We have a template for the inspector to go in. I have direction for them to go in as a team. So if one's missing something, because it's easy to miss stuff while the tenant is talking to you, that the other person is looking for the things that may have been missed. So we do interior inspections. There is going to be no way that we can establish a mandatory interior inspection for landlords. That's already been clearly established in the courts. And I've been to the State House for hearings trying to lighten that or lessen it, and that's not going to happen. I've been told point blank, property owners' rights or the landlord's rights are going to far exceed those needs. And me and you know that it would be awesome to get inside those houses, but we have to adhere to the rights of the property owner. And they're not going to voluntarily let us in, even if we write a code, because those codes have already been struck down throughout the state.
Well, but we've faced that for a long time, and again, for better or for worse, I was here with the state law has always been the same, and we established a culture years ago where you just did it, and so this number one has the challenge in there that we have to figure out a way that we'll get those voluntary inspections done. You know, if it's a way of combining the working through neighborhood associations and blocks, whether it's working with the landlords, whatever. If the tenants, if a tenant's in good standing, they're protected from being evicted on a retaliatory basis in Kansas, if they've let the code compliance people in. So part of what's in here, based on your concerns about the voluntary entry, the issues of the fact that we did write into our local version of the IPMC the chance for a voluntary inspection that didn't involve a write-up. If that's a way to take advantage of that, that's apparently not being used very much. Even using it with landlords, coming up with a system whereby that voluntary check-off was of value, meant that there would not be a full inspection because we already knew that the house was fine. I don't have it all figured out. It's just that what's written here is taking the problems that we faced, but the issues that we know are there, and saying, okay, let's try and lay out the challenges and let's figure out a way to do it, to make Mike's job easier.
I've been trying to come to that solution for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was challenged with the former city manager and this current city manager for solutions, and we have met and sat down and looked at the legalities and the options we have. And that's where we are at this time. I would love to have interior inspections more frequently. And anybody who asks us, we will come and do an inspection if they can tell us that they believe something's wrong. We're just not going to do an inspection just to inspect. But if they say, look, I don't have a hot water heater, leaky pipe, you name it, we're coming and we're doing a full inspection. We're happy to do that, and that's one of the goals that we pushed forward since I've got here.
Well, and the issue is to obviously, if this is coming out of the council committee, it's a challenge that more people can be engaged if you guys haven't, again, without pointing a finger at anybody or being critical. If this is something we haven't quite figured out here, maybe we can work on it. I don't know that any of us are expecting this to get figured out overnight, but if we know where we want to go and maybe get some more heads on it, we can there. Councilman Dobler.
Thank you. Let me ask this question, Mike. If you know what the issues are, if the council came to you tomorrow and said, we're going to increase funding, the amount of whatever, pick a number, what would you do first? How would you attack the problem with more funding?
Yeah, the devils are in the details in that. If we increase inspectors, I then have to increase abatement crew. Currently, I have 2 members of the abatement crew, and then I have the inmate crews that assist, but they're hit and miss right now because of COVID. So let's just take COVID out of it, and they're available to me. They're running up to 200 cases behind on mowing alone. We are organized, and we're doing, next week we have 12 pre-warrants. This week we have 6. Back when I started, they were doing maybe 4 or 5 warrants a week, maybe, and now we're doing up to 30. So if we increase inspectors, we have to increase abatement crew, and if we increase the inspectors, we also have to increase the legal department, because they've already dedicated 1 to 2 days to our office alone for prosecution in this. And then if I increase the inspectors and the abatement crew, I'm going to have to increase my internal staffing, because they're also working their full 8 at 100%. So what we can do, you give me more inspectors and you give me more abatement crew, we can abate, clean, bill, and address these properties. I know that this city, I've been here and working the streets since the 80s. And I can tell you that the houses I walked into in the 80s versus the houses I walk into now, I do not see what I saw in the 80s of electrical wires being run through walls, of pure danger of fire hazards that we were running into. Either the landlords are getting really good at hiding it, or we're not running into it as much. But I also know as a police officer, we never told code compliance when we saw that. We worked a call, we left. Now the police department, the fire department, and every other department contacts us, and we've actually utilized their reports to gain access into these properties. So we are working with them. But if our budget increased, that's where we would go to gain more compliance or to get the community to care more. We've seen a dramatic change from the 80s to the 90s with our urban sprawl and the people moving out of the core of this city. And as they've walked away from the properties of this city, then the quality of those houses has deteriorated. We have to be invested within the core of our city, and I don't have an answer of how to convince the community to change their norms. And it is a norm aspect of what we're working. In my neighborhood, you won't see a trash can out after 12 hours. You know, the next morning, if someone's trash can's still out, we're worried for that person. I can go 2 miles away and those trash cans are left out 7 days a week. That is a neighborhood and a community norm. And if we need to find a solution. When I say we, it's the city, the community, and all of us involved need to find a way to change the norms within our community, that the houses that aren't in compliance, yards that aren't in compliance, the bushes and the weeds, those are maintained. I don't have a simple solution to that. I've taken proactive approaches of contacting the violators before they're even violators and saying, hey, we know that you were in violation last year. Be a team player and help us. If they don't take the pride or they don't care, I don't have an answer for you.
And that's why it's a bigger issue than just you, because you're right.
Correct.
That's what we need to do, and that's where, for instance, before you even came over to code, you know, there was an idea that we'd work up a volunteer corps so that if somebody couldn't take care of their own property, you sort of went off on a story about the people that have bought up all those properties in Highcrest. But I remember learning that even though generally people said, oh, it must be landlords, those out-of-town landlords that have these slummy rental properties, and in fact they weren't most of the landlords are local, because we haven't really been a hot market for investors from out of town to buy in unless it's somebody's family who moved away or something like that. And that further, a lot of our worst properties are home-owned. And there's somebody who's lower income or something's wrong that they're not taking care of it. And so we wanted to get a really good program going to provide some assistance for people that couldn't do it. And the city kind of took a start through neighborhood relations to get some volunteer names and hook them up, and it just kind of floundered. And with the best of intentions, and you guys do an incredibly good job, in my opinion, of giving people a resource list when you go out, but somehow that's not enough. And the issue, for instance, what you just said, where an assumption that we should go out and mow people's yards, and clean up their trash is one of the things that's built this huge expense and maybe has gone too far to where people expect. I think I've told you guys, you know, people will call me and say, well, the city didn't trim very well. It's like, really? You know, we shouldn't even be out there mowing it at all. You just paid for that. How much you want to pay for? And so how we can, it is a challenge to how we can flip that back and not be spending $1 million a year in tax money on abatements of which we only get 500,000 back. That's wrong.
500 is what I can account for. We're still getting money from 2012. So when you ask, and we look at a year of, say, 2017, that's what we've got so far. In 2023, we'll still be getting money from 2017.
Well,
so I'll never have a perfect number of how much money we get back, because these people take a long time to make their payments. And there's some people, like you talked about, the out-of-state people, who don't care. And they don't care that there's a creditor after them until at some point they try to make another investment. And they go, well, you're not going to make this investment until you fix your thing in Topeka, Kansas. And then we get a check for $800 to clear that up. And that's where we are. And then we do have a large chunk that we're going to eat because there aren't people that own the property.
But the issue is how do we minimize that? Is to
I'm sorry, what?
that. I'm sorry.
And the best way to tackle that, and it's a long thing, is when those properties go on the tax rolls and the county auctions them. We have been up to the State House with a proposal that when people are not paying their taxes, that the city could take that property and give it to a nonprofit who is then contracted to make that a quality home. And the state has said, heck no. They feel that we're taking from the poor, which isn't true. We'd be taking our zombie houses, the ones that there is no more people invested, or the one I own on Jewel, where the son lives in California. He doesn't care. The mom's dead. He won't return my calls. He won't do anything. That house is just going to sit and rot until it's taken in taxes in 4 or 5 years. I've called that guy 10 times hoping to irritate him with my voice messages. You know, after 10 voice messages, sooner or later he'll give up and he'll call me. But he's not, and he doesn't have to, and he doesn't have to worry about it, because even if we issue a warrant for his arrest, he's in California. He's never coming to speak again. But we have those. Those are what are taking our hit of the 500,000. But I can't tell you that 500,000 is going to be 500,000 in 2023 or just 50,000.
Understood. Tell me, the housing study said that there were 6,000 vacant units in town. Do you think that number is right?
I'm not sure how they got those numbers. So I don't know. 6,000 is a lot.
It was always like 600.
Yeah, because that's like, I think 10% of all our structures.
Yeah,
and I can tell you, housing-wise, we're not making it 10%. You would see that on every city block, or you would see it in entire city blocks that are vacant, and that's not the case. So I'm not positive of how they came up with that number, unless that includes businesses throughout the city as well, commercial. But that's not what I think it said. I'm not going to tell you they're wrong. They also might have come up with ways like you need water and water shut off. Like I got one, I thought, oh boy, big deal, because they had like 19 water supplies to the place. Well, 18 are shut off, which makes it seem like 18 are vacant. Well, no, the owner now pays for all the water.
Oh.
But when you do a water history search, you see that 17 are disconnected. I said, man, I have a vacant apartment complex there. You go there, it's not. It's a healthy, thriving apartment complex. So I'm not sure. I can't give you a straight answer where they got 6,000. That's a lot.
I've asked and I couldn't get an answer, so I just wondered, since you are on the street every day.
Yep.
Well, these are challenging, but again, if we've got some goals, we need to set those goals and then see what we can do to not just challenge Mike, but to work with Mike to see if we can come up with some solutions. That's where these came from. go into more details on some of these, but we spent 6 months going through lots of stories, so I'm not sure we need to do that again. Any more discussion on item number 1? We just need to review this and kind of get inside it. Item number 2 is reduce, interestingly enough, deterioration in vacant structures. The issue there is to make sure that they don't, with our blessing, deteriorate. We haven't any luck with I know with the foreclosed units, apparently we're doing all right with the property registration ordinance. Mike?
Yes.
We're getting money anyway. Are we having success with the neighborhood type properties?
So you're talking about the vacant structure registration?
Yes.
It's still I hate to use these words, still a work in progress. They are getting properties registered. We're not facing much resistance from the property owners. There's been a few that are called and thrown a fit, saying it's not really vacant. I said, well, I'll walk over personally with you and let's take a look at the property. So there's been a little bit of community backlash because people don't want to pay the fee to register their property. They also don't want to be in the system. But I don't know what to tell you on that. That's part of it, and I need you in the system so I can identify which property is vacant and go and address them and find you when we find the door kicked in. We kept the fee at a minimal for vacant structures as opposed to the foreclosed, just for the thought in mind of the people who own vacant properties that can't afford to pay, or we're not looking to punish those people. We're looking to get those properties back in compliance. So when we identify them, we do cite them. I know you mentioned mothballing in here. The devil's in the detail on that, but we're going to need interior inspections for the mothballing to see that it's done. You can say, no, you can do it all from the outside. Well, then we're already doing it. We're already citing the problems and the violations that are there. And to get into these houses, I'm not getting into them. Because landlords are not going to sign off and give me permission no matter how the code is written. And they are protected by our Constitution and by our laws to prevent me from going in there. And I can promise you they're not going to voluntarily let me in to inspect it to see if they mothballed it correctly. Some of the buildings, like our historic buildings and the people that want to be paid to have their historic building registered on, they'll cooperate, but those are few and far between.
Well, mothballing is pretty simple, but it has to do with fixing the outside so that it's not deteriorating the joints and so on, making sure that the windows, which of course are already covered, but ventilating so that the interior doesn't deteriorate at a faster rate. One of the biggest things that happens, and there's an alternate in this one if you saw it, is that the roofs aren't fixed. And so they leak and it damages the inside of the structure. And are we making any progress on being able to do roofs that we can't see from the pickup?
Even the roofs you can't see from a pickup, if the roof's leaking, we're not going to know. We can't get in the building. We don't have probable cause to get in the building. Are you asking if we've got drones to go up and check on roofs? No, we don't, nor do I plan on moving to that venue when we're busy enough doing what we're currently doing. But I got what you're saying. I know the specific property that you were talking about. But when it comes to other properties, we look at buildings and we go, that roof is bad, we cite it. They come to court and they go, Your Honor, it's not leaking. And so then they're directed to fix whatever's broken. We're not going to know of an interior building has a leaking roof, but a property owner is wise to take care of their property, because if they're allowing that to leak, they're walking away and abandoning their property and allowing it to deteriorate, which financially foolish.
Well, and the first one I think of is 1107 Taylor. That was one of the early ones when I was here, and the city went through all the expense and time of running it through a condemnation process. But when you looked inside, there was damage on the south wall and a bunch of junk all around the house. But when you looked at the pictures, You know, and it eventually was purchased by the Kerns and fixed up and is a 5-bedroom house with a family in it. But we spend money that's not necessarily your department's money on once you get into a demo order with all that. And so, again,
we don't want to demo any property. Our goal is to have zero demolitions. And we provide every property owner the right and the hearings to challenge us and to say, no, this house shouldn't come down and be cut. And because of that, we have well over 100 houses that we're eyeballing for demolition that people stepped up and have rehabbed that they wouldn't have rehabbed had we not stepped in. They may have in 5-10 years or what have you, but part of the goal on the demolitions is to get the property owner to step up and save the house. So you don't want a demolition. We would love for you to save it. Every house we tear down in our poor communities leaves a vacant lot.
Well,
and then that's one that we're citing because they walked away from it. So our goal with our demolition project and our special structures is to gain compliance through the enforcement of the special structures unit, and we will bend over backwards to assist those people to save those properties.
so you don't think that anything further would make a difference?
Yes, there are things further, and that's what we're continually working on and trying to identify to solve that. I don't, like you said, I don't want to continue with the same old way we're doing things. We're continually adapting, improving, and making this system better. When it comes to those properties, our special structures unit, which is only 4 years old, has been highly successful. So we're looking at that, and we're even looking to expand it to find the solution for the people that can't afford to fix their properties. We're constantly working with nonprofits saying, hey, can you help these people? And they're going out and they're assisting them to save them. So is there nothing we can do? Absolutely not. But we're constantly changing and finding better ways to do it.
Okay, and what you're relating, and Councilman Dobler wasn't on the council, Councilwoman Ortiz was there were some years, maybe it was 4 years ago when your department was able to secure a lot of money for demolitions, thinking that that's what you were going to do, and then in the process of that discovered that success with just confronting people with those issues and getting them fixed.
Close, yeah. I always had a goal of saving as many as possible, but the proposal was to tear down as many as possible because we went after the low-hanging fruit in the beginning.
Right.
All those houses that had to come down, you know, and now we're getting to where after we knocked out 100 plus houses that way, we're getting to where we're able to save these houses through the program.
Okay. Well, it could be that, I mean, with your vacant structures ordinance, I'm just thinking out loud here, that being able to offer those guidelines to people who want to keep the house just as a way to, if they do it or if they don't do it, they at least have some ideas of how to take care of mom's house or whatever it was so that it doesn't deteriorate as badly.
That's what we're doing.
Because I knew that you've already learned and or set that minimized demolition policy. Certainly that was one of the recommendations out of the housing study, was that it be a city policy that we would minimize demolitions. That of course drives back into fixing all the houses that are around. Okay, let's go to the expense gap on the abatements. Mike, you talked about that a little bit earlier, and there's been this assumption that if we were going to write somebody up, we had to do the abatement, but that's really voluntary in the code.
And that's not it. We have a majority of people that comply with our citations. I can tell you that we have been much more aggressive with the people that don't comply, and we are taking action. There used to be an attitude of that's close enough or that's good enough, and they would cite somebody, the people would clean up 40, 50% of it, and they would close the gates. And I saw this and said, that's not very satisfactory to the person living next door. The guy living next door is still living with the trash.
Right.
So close enough is not good enough. And with the position that I took, that we will do everything we can to get you to voluntarily do it. We leave door hangers on your door. We contact you. We call you. We provide our phone numbers for you to call us if you can't get it done. We send both all we have to do is send a certified letter legally. We also send a first class letter because we know that certified letters sometimes don't get signed for because they're playing the game or they're at work and they just didn't sign it. There's legitimate reasons not to. But we send a first class, even though we don't have to, just to provide, we know they got that. It's in their mail, it didn't come back to us. Or if it does come back to us, then we do additional research to find out if the property has an actual legit address for the owner. All the reasons that we're doing this, we have tried to be extremely proactive in gaining voluntary compliance. My inspectors are given permission to allow for brief extensions if somebody will set up a plan of action. The properties that we're abating is because we have taken an aggressive approach to the ones that people are electing not to address. And that is just by the attitude that we took, that we're going to get this done as opposed to let them flounder out there and repeat violations. Our focus right now is our repeat violators who have generated 40-yard roll-offs of junk on their property, and sometimes in a matter of 2 months. We set it, we go with a 40-yard roll-off, we clean it, we bill them $2,000, they pay it or they let it go to taxes or the collections, and then they're back at it in 2 more months. Our inspectors are now setting up lists that they're going back to those properties the week after the roll-off and then citing for minor violations. Let's get it started then. Let's nail them then so that we're not occupying our entire staff, because our entire staff has to go to that 40-yard roll-off cleanup, and it takes away from what everybody else wants to do. So we're being proactive in it. I don't have an answer for you on how to get that money back. We send it we do everything that I know we legally can do. I've suggested that city's finance look at what we're doing and audit what we're doing and see if there's a better system, because it's the same system as what I walked in with 5 years ago. If there's a better tool out there that can get people to pay, I am all for it. I don't know what that system is.
Well, and there was some discussion that I heard kind of floating around that when we lost the abatement crew, that if we were hiring and then we're charging more because we were paying private people more, that maybe that would, I don't know how many people, we all know of some who think, hey, that's a pretty good deal. If I was mowing it, I'd have to mow once a week when it was really growing season, and then at least once every two to 4 weeks the rest of the summer. And these folks come mow it only twice a summer. They call it good. They bill me $200, and what a deal, or $400, whatever it turns out to be.
We built quite a bit more than that, but I understand what you're saying there. I don't know. There's a ton of people out there that think it's a good deal that the city does it. I do know there's people when it comes to weeds, they won't mow it until they have to mow it, and that's just the fact that they know the system. And so when we said, that's why one of the reasons Councilman Ortiz asked why we don't.
Lost you, Mike.
We only.
We can't hear you.
I still on mute?
No, it's kind of garbled somehow.
Oh, I had a phone call come in.
Okay. Now you're muted.
Hopefully it's my son, so.
Okay.
So you might get to listen to a phone call. But so we're finding ways to do that, but I don't know if anybody considered it a good deal. But if the council wishes to increase the fines and the penalties, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to say that you shouldn't. What I will tell you is that most of the people I deal with are poor already. So we better find a happy medium for those, or we're going to be pricing them out of their livelihood when we give them a $500 fee because they failed to mow their lawn. I'm okay with it though. There might be a time we need to increase our fees because salaries have went up, the dump fees have went up, everything's gone up over the last 10 years, or whatever time we set this instruction. So if we want to increase that, I'm okay with that. I just know who I'm dealing with. And I know that most of the people that aren't paying are poor.
Well, and it's pretty much, again, when I wrote these, tried to capture what had been discussed, and both at the staff and the council and the community in general doesn't want to hurt poor people, but it's a matter of how do we raise that bar back to where the community is, everybody's proud to live in, and can we get a system in place that's timely, that can line up either volunteer people who don't really want to work a regular job but would mow yards for $20 or whatever, and or volunteers. There are some programs that people have been seeing that have emerged nationally where men do volunteer work for neighbors and communities as a way to pay forward whatever. And so it's not just you again, but a matter of us deciding what we want our community to look like and then strategizing how the heck we can get there in ideally not a punitive way, but if, how do we make the consequences bad enough for the right people? And then are there ways we can help the people who genuinely need help? Can we work on that together?
Absolutely. I know with the volunteers, because I was excited about volunteers that would be mowing. And we had people step up and they go, we're ready to do it. We would organize it. We would call them, they'd mow once, we'd call them back, they go, I'm kind of busy. And so the volunteer program, the police department has an excellent one. Maybe I know that's what we try to copy. But when somebody shows up to a house and goes into that backyard and sees that small jungle, they're not doing it with their Toro. They go, this is bigger than we thought. And the volunteers have been unreliable that I have generated. God bless them, but if somebody can develop a program for volunteers, I would love for that group to step up and say, hey, look, we'll run it, you just give us the addresses.
And see, I think that's the kind of thing that can come out of these sorts of objectives. If it doesn't have to be, Mike Hagen's a manager of a code compliance program, not a volunteer coordinator, and not to put it, look for somebody else, either some entity that already exists in the community or elsewhere to
yeah, no, I totally got you. And I have been waiting for that solution and that answer, and I have watched department heads, department leaders, other division managers try to create that program, and then also contact the YMCA or the United Way, hoping that we could get it up and rolling, and it hasn't been there. If somebody listening to this or somebody on the council knows how to run a volunteer program for these, that would be fantastic.
Well, again, this wasn't intended to be all on you, but a matter of us as a council committee recommended to the council that if we had certain standards we wanted to meet, we needed to take on the challenge of together figuring out how we could get there. If adding a few more heads to just yours and your staffs, which have done so much, would help. And the last one that's on here relates to the others. We've already talked about it some. That's a matter of getting that vegetation underway, under control.
I agree with you that it looks like hell, and it is out of control. One of the things I would first ask is that we enforce the codes that we have on the books. And we are, in my division, enforcing the codes that I have in the books. There's other codes that can be enforced to address those issues. We have taken a proactive approach to the shrubs, the weeds, and the bushes by notifying every single previous violator from the year before to ask them to maintain them. I could probably change that notification to include the shrubbery in the alleys or the volunteer trees. My notice doesn't have that in there. I have no problem putting that in there because there is a need. When I see what you see and I know what you were talking about. I got no issue with it, but I can also tell you that being proactive and asking everybody to take care of their stuff has not stopped us from running up to 200 cases backlog. If we're running 200 cases backlog, on grass and weeds alone, throw in the shrubs and the trees, and I'll be 400 cases back. We won't be able to do it unless we hire more abatement crew staff.
Well,
The
again,
crews that are doing it are busting their rear ends, and they are working, including they're working on the weekends, and they're working overtime to get it done.
well, and knowing that, I mean, nobody wants to increase the, well, maybe they do, but one would think not increase the cost to the city. Also, this has deteriorated enough in time. Doesn't it seem like it would need some sort of huge initiative to sort of like bring up the rear? I mean, just to do model blocks or something, and have some big initiative that might not last forever, but that would start to get the town to look like we wanted it to and like it used to. It's hard for me to imagine how that could be done with enforcement alone at this point because it's so bad. But
You're absolutely right. And I've tried to be proactive with that with Team Up to Clean Up, notifying every single property owner in a specific geographic block area to let's fix your property. Here's what we're doing. We're going to come in and cite you. Why don't you clean it before we do it? And they're still not adhering to it. Now, some are. Please, let me back up. Many people are taking the time to fix their property. Other ones don't care. And one of the biggest things, and I don't have an answer for you, is to change the community norm of what is acceptable. And what I find acceptable in many of these neighborhoods is flat out unacceptable. And what I tell neighbors, do not tolerate what you see. Report it and call it in, because if you tolerate it, expect it. It's going to happen on the guy behind them, and it's going to happen on another house down. So when people are not mowing, they're trashing their yards, we want them cited immediately. We want our neighbors to step up and call us, and they can do it anonymously. And we tell them, and every time we get together, do not tolerate blight. If you see blight, let us know, and we are your partner. We will help you, because if you tolerate it, expect it.
Yeah, and that's been well-intentioned, but the flip side of that, which happens, is where are they? They aren't out yet. And looking at the city as the solution to everything. And if we can change that, how do we do that?
I would. You got $1 million question there.
Yeah,
you got
exactly.
You have a national $1 million question there, because City of Topeka is not some unique city with the blight that we have. It is nationwide. And if you can come up with a solution for that, you can tour the nation giving an answer.
Maybe we still need to call Sioux Falls. I remember years ago that the city had gone on the intercity trip to Little Rock. I think it was Little Rock, and that was before my time, and Mayor Bunton was so passionate about cleaning up the community and came back and said, well, it sounded like Girdle the Turtle. We need turtles, more turtles. We need more inspectors. Let's have 30 inspectors like they do. And of course that didn't happen. But then a couple years later, everybody went to, again, I wasn't able to go, but went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and they had one inspector. And the place looked great. And so we probably need to call Sioux Falls if it still looks as great as it did 10 years ago or whatever it was.
I would always caution it's what they show you.
Understood.
I always hear how Lawrence is so much nicer now, and I can go over to parts of Lawrence where I see graffiti. You don't see graffiti in our city that much. I see more graffiti in Lawrence. I see weeds. I see couches laying in the yard. It's where you go. If I want to show off our city, specific neighborhood, I'm not taking you to. And if I want to hide our blight, I'm not taking you to other neighborhoods. I can tell you that I have a family that lives in a resort community that came and visited and was blown away by the beauty of our town.
You know what, Mike? You're breaking up again, and Neil says he needs to be off the call in 4 minutes. So I think with those two things happening, and hopefully, Mike, you got some tips from our earlier broadband conversation on your internet. Good grief. Let's plan to all think about these things. Again, if we have these goals for our city, then we need to have these aspirational goals. We just have to think about what the strategies would be and how we can work together to help Mike out and continue on this track that we're on. You got a last word, Michael?
Yeah, the finish off, the chief of police has asked for 1, 3, 5-year goals. So these are things that we're going to be doing under the police department. We were doing in the first place as it was setting goals. So I have a task now under my command to come up with 1, 3, and 5-year goals. And some of what this is in here will be part of those goals. This is all stuff we're doing now. So, and we've been doing it, and dynamically we're changing, and we're setting the goals. Just get to decide, is it going to be my supervision, the police department I'm setting goals for, or the public health and safety committee?
Well, what we need to do is work together, and we need to give you the backup that you need if there's more heads on it or whatever, so that we can get there. So we are scheduled for a meeting on December 14th from 3 to 5. That'll be time to get together and wrap up, hopefully, the broadband stuff, give us time to think about these things, all of us, and come back and see what we should report out. Anything else? Thank you. Mike, I'm so glad you're better. Is Rosanna better too?
Hey, well, I'm good enough.
That's not good enough. We're waiting. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.